And Tucson for everyone. Oh, Tucson Acupuncture. Thank you. It wasn't on the flyer. Yes, thank you so much to those people. And thank you guys for coming out tonight. The head of our panel is going to be Miranda Schubert. I also want to say right now in New York City, Zoran Mamdani is leading. And he's running on free buses and fast buses and a cheaper city, which, you know, that's what we want. So, and I'll pass it over to Miranda, Miranda Schubert, who's going to be our panel leader for tonight. Moderator. Thank you, Miranda.
Thank you, Jean. Thank you, Can you hear me? Okay, thanks everybody for being here. I feel like folks that are sitting over here maybe are having a harder time seeing. So maybe we can reposition the stool so it's like more next to the table. But while we're dealing with that, I'm going to go ahead and start off with some introductions, starting with myself. My name is Miranda Schubert. I'll be moderating the panel today. I'm with Tucson for Everyone and the Transit for All Coalition. And the event that you're at tonight is called Unburdening Transit. And it's about imagining a better system for mobility in Tucson, one that's more accessible, one that serves the need of all Tucsonans. So we're really fortunate to be joined by these panelists who are going to bring their perspectives to what I'm hoping is more of a roundtable conversation and less like a panel. So I'm going to let the panelists go through and please introduce yourself and also say a little bit about what brings you to the space of transit advocacy. Okay, we'll start with Jean.
Gene Caywood. I've been an advocate for transit in Tucson since the early 70s or the mid 70s. I've been on continuously since that time on various transportation committees that the city has set up. I'm currently on the Transit Advisory Committee. I'm vice chair, Suzanne is chair. I'm also a transit historian. I've written a couple of books about transit in Tucson. And I'm one of the founders of Old Pueblo Trolley. We operated the heritage streetcars on 4th Avenue and University Boulevard for 17 years till the city did the modern streetcar. That was an all volunteer effort. We put track in the streets with volunteers. We put overhead line over it with volunteers. We operated it for 17 years every weekend with volunteers. We now have a transit museum down in the corner of 36th Street and South 4th Avenue. Come down and see our historic vehicle collection of transit vehicles, particularly Arizona. Also, there's something else I was going to say about myself, but I probably bored you enough. So anyway, I'll pass it on to Suzanne.
Thanks for being here. I'm Suzanne Schafer. I have always felt like cars were kind of overkill in terms of like more than necessary to get the basic human body from one place to another. So I've been fortunate to grow up riding bicycles and was happy when I came to Tucson and found a transit system that was really very useful. So I've been a Suntran rider since 1985 and started getting involved in advocacy about 14 years ago, and have served on a bunch of committees and focus groups and so forth. But when, and got very interested in fare free transit, maybe around 2018, 2019. And then when our city leadership allowed this to be a reality here, I kind of jumped on it and started getting involved in advocacy for that, because I think it's just an amazing thing for the community. And thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Elaina Richards. Can you hear me in the back? Okay. I just graduated with a master's in public health from our very own University of Arizona's College of Public Health, Sacramento. And I do a bunch of different little things in town, but right now I'm working with the county health department on their REACH program. Racial and ethnic approaches to community health and built environment overlaps with that. And I also work part-time at St. Mark's Presbyterian Church, which has a significant public transit population that relies on our system. So I'm here to talk about some of that and just general studies of the public health and the built environment.
Hi, buenas tardes. My name is Vanessa Gallego. My pronouns are she, her, ella. I'm executive director of FUGA, Families United Gaining Accessibility. I also sit on the Arizona Department of Transportation Vulnerable Road Users Committee. And I was 2 months ago very happy to be part of the Unbound Mobility, which is the reframing of mobility justice under Doña Lugo. So very happy to be here today and happy to be amongst y'all.
Like that.
Hello, everybody. My name is Melissa Cordero. My pronouns are she, her. I am an Air Force veteran. I am part of a grassroots progressive veteran group called Common Defense. I am the Arizona lead clean energy organizer for Veterans Power America. I got into any veterans out there? All right. Woo. We should talk after. Looking for members. I got into transit because my first taste of independence was when I got my bicycle as a kid, because if you were an 80s baby, that meant you could go everywhere and do whatever you want. And then also I'm a Fugista at heart, and looking forward to this panel. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I thought we could start off with a little icebreaker just to get things going, and you all can participate too. So think about how you normally get around to do the things you need to do, whether it's go to work, go to classes, get groceries, go to the doctor, whatever. Thinking about that as somebody who lives in Tucson, what is one thing you love about getting around Tucson? And what is one thing you really do not love about getting around Tucson? Does anybody want to start? Just thinking about that. Jean? Yeah?
Well, I don't know. I don't ride the bus too much anymore, but I used to when I was in college at the university. I rode the bus back in the 1960s every day to the university when nobody else rode the bus, and the service was very lousy. So I've been committed to transit my whole life, and I appreciate the fact the transit system is there. Now where I run the museum, I can take transit, but it takes a long time. So I would, it would be good if we had faster transit, and it would also be good, I think, what I'd like to see is more light rail and streetcar extensions and things like that. So yeah.
What I don't like is fast cars that don't know how to make square turns, and so they're way too close to the curb, which is supposed to be the pedestrian and bike space. What I love is the bike racks on the buses, because my favorite way to get around is a combination of bus and bike. The bus extends my bike ability, and the bike makes the bus so much easier because I don't have to use 2 or 3 buses as much, and it's just amazingly flexible. So that's my fun game.
I'd have to say the thing I dislike the most is the lack of walkability with our transportation. I grew up on East Side Tucson, so like they discontinued the bus up to Cloud in 2017. So Udall is the closest station, and it's been in the news for that, and it's just so spaced out over there. There's kind of, I wish there was a little bit more density to our movement on that side of town. But my favorite part is basically how our grid system, I think it lends itself well to a bit of the caftan method of bike lanes, and they call it plaid or something, but I like to think of it as a blanket of the city with could be train. I'm a big train advocate, if you can't see. I heart train. But like with roads for cars and bike only and bus only, and you can kind of weave it together in a way that Tucson hasn't quite imagined yet, and I'd like to see happen.
I'm gonna start what I love, right? I absolutely love that whenever I choose to get on the Suntran, it's gonna be cool during the summer. So I'm very thankful about that. But what I don't like about our mobility in our streets is I love all the great new infrastructure coming in, and I hate where it ends. and it leaves you in the middle of like, where's that connecting thing? So no sidewalk, no protected bike lane. But right, it gets us all excited up until the point you're not.
Okay, I'm gonna start with what I don't like and then two things I do like. Okay, let's see, I don't like that fare free transit is, it's at a threat, right? Like it might be taken away. I hate the idea of that. And I'm glad that we're all here fighting that it doesn't. The two things that I do like, I love it when I'm at a crosswalk with either my bike or with my legs and the amazing person in the car decides to stop and then the car behind them like has to slam on their brakes. That's great. I also like that I can get from Silver Bell to Craycroft in under an hour with the combination of my bicycle and my bus. So.
Thank you. Okay, so we've had an icebreaker. I'm going to ask a few questions to get things rolling, and then there's a couple of questions that were submitted in advance by people who may be here today. And then we'll open it up if anyone in the audience has more questions. Okay, so let's talk about fare-free public transit. Let's talk about buses and Sunlink. What do you say to people who are concerned about the so-called expense of operating a fare-free public transit system? What would you say to people who are questioning the expense? Maybe we'll mix it up and start with Melissa, just to put you on the spot.
Hang on, let me look at my notes. No. Thank you for that question. I think that the cost is already subsidized, right? Like I think this is something that it's not going to make sense even if we charge now within the next 5 years. But more importantly, I think that we need to continue to focus on what fare free transit does for the community, for underserved communities, for underinvested communities. Like we need to just keep focusing on that. I think the numbers will make sense, but I think that's also the problem is we're always looking at the numbers part of it. But at the end of the day, if we can change the culture, right? If we can get people to believe in transit and start to change their mindset about how they get around this city, I think that payout in the long run is really what's going to count.
I think where I challenge folks is the cost of life. We're about to enter the hottest summer of our lives, and this is actually the coolest summer of your life. So as we enter this and we're talking about Tucson Resilient Together, if we're trying to reach those goals of climate action, then we're talking about real investment, and we're talking about investing in people and not having people die of heat-related deaths when that's completely avoidable. Being at the Heat Summit for the second year in a row, at the university, we heard time and time again from both professionals, from scientists, from doctors saying that these heat-related illnesses are completely preventable, and we're one of the hottest cities in the country, so why shouldn't be leading with investment in our community and being able to move that last mile getting home?
Vanessa led me right into my point about health. You touched on the environmental stuff and just how much, we were talking about it before, the bus is a moving cooling center in the summer. The fare is the expense of taking care of that person if it gets worse, if that makes sense. It's prevention. The language of like kind of how the transit system interacts with public health. The county health department, I was just reading it today, they have a community health impact plan, and they have 4 subject areas: mental and behavioral health, substance abuse, access to services, and social determinants of health, which transportation and built environment is one of those. Access to health care services being one of them in itself. And they list fare-free transit in the document as an asset to that health access. And so the question being, what was it about expense of keeping it fare free? It's kind of human lives is what we're touching on. Maybe not immediately, but down the road as weather gets worse. You said it's the coolest summer for the rest of our lives. I work with a bunch of people over 70. I tell them that every time we talk about the heat. The weather is not this basic little, small talk conversation when we're talking about the health effects of it in that context. So transit is a factor in that for expenses of all the other ways we take care of each other in this city without even knowing.
Thank you. Well, I can echo everything that folks have said. There are incredible costs to the road system and to the use of automobiles that we subsidize in many ways. And for example, the roads are pretty much paid by the entire community, and the road use is unequal depending on what mode you're using. It's a good question because money is really the only logical reason to even think about fares. But I'd like to just propose a thought experiment. If we have a transit system that serves all of the needs that it serves and that allows people to have access to the kinds of services that they need, and let's say we want more money for that transit system, and we're thinking about how we might come up with a way to come up with some more money for that transit system. I don't think the first thing that people would cook up would be charging money for each person who gets on the bus. Because to do that, gosh, how would you do that? You'd have to come up with technology to collect money. You'd have to come up with security to deal with the money you just collected. You would be burdening only the people riding the transit with this expense that this new money that you want to bring in would be only falling on those people. And wait, didn't you want to incentivize people to use that transit system and disincentivize other modes of transit? So really, my point is that the only reason that we charge fares is because we have been charging fares. And so this doesn't make sense.
I would say the reason the answer to the question is that what is transit for? You want to move as many people as you can. You want people to use it. And since we went fare free, it's been an interesting, I call it an experiment at this point still. And anyway, my point's going to be that in COVID, transit systems all over the country really suffered. They went way down in the number of riders. Most of those transit systems have not yet recovered to the point they were at before COVID. Tucson is an exception. The bus system has recovered to where we were before COVID. We haven't recovered to where we were before the transit strike in 2015, and transit strikes are worse than COVID. For that reason, I say the labor management issue is always a huge thing, and you never want to have a strike, and you don't want to have fares too high. You want to have them as low as possible, and so free is as low as possible. The other statistic I want to mention is that after COVID, the streetcar immediately jumped to 103% of its ridership before COVID. Instantly, as soon as people got rid of their masks and started walking around. That's unheard of. And that's an indication of what rail transit will do and the way our streetcar really works, and people love it. But our bus system, there's a handful of cities only in the country that have recovered to the extent we have on our bus system, and that's because the fares are free. So that, to me, is the best test for free fares is more people use the bus.
Thank you so much. So part of the reason why we're here and why we're bringing everybody together to have this conversation is an effort to promote more engagement, getting involved, and ensuring that we actually can make our transit system better, keep our transit fare free, et cetera. So I wonder if you all have any thoughts about where do we start? Because we have our work cut out for us if we're going to make this a transit system. If we're going to make Tucson a city where people can get around accessibly. Actually, yeah, I want to expand it. I don't want to say just transit. I just want to say, what do we need to do in order to make Tucson a city where people can get around easily without a car? What's just something that comes to mind for you when you're thinking about undoing our car dependence?
Well, that's a tough question, and the automobile is extremely convenient, and I don't think you're never going to get rid of it. And I think that all you can do, and transit, quite frankly, is never going to compete with the automobile in terms of speed and time. So if people are concerned about their time, they're going to drive their car. If they're not that concerned, they're going to take the bus. Now, there's lots of other good reasons to take the bus for environmental reasons and all kinds of other good reasons. But so I just think all you can do is provide the best transit system you can with the money you have available. So to me, the whole issue comes down to money. And so let me talk about money for a while, for a minute. The reason we're always fighting a battle every year for the transit budget is because we as a region do not have a large enough, we have a small dedicated funding source with the RTA, which may go away in March of next year if the public votes no on the new RTA. But otherwise, we don't have a dedicated funding source for transit. All the money comes out, except for the federal money we get, all the money comes out of the city general fund. And that and prices, our costs have risen a lot higher than inflation and the money the city brings in. So each year, the city is spending a larger percentage of their budget on transit. And that's why your mayor and council is faced with a dilemma. So back to what we should do. I'm gonna say you guys, I'm kind of old, I've organized a lot of stuff before. You guys need to organize a coalition to support better transit and mainly to obtain a dedicated funding source that will provide the money we need to provide an adequate transit system, to expand it region-wide instead of just within the city of Tucson, to extend the streetcar, to do other good things, to provide better transit, which the people will use it's like if you build it, they will come. That's what happened with the streetcar. And we need to be building stuff.
I'll take it off from that. If you build it, they will come, because I'm a baseball fan myself. But I think I'm going to try to transition everything, because you touched on so many things. Induced demand is what he's talking about with if you build it, they will come. We measure our transit system service based on the demand that currently exists. And my answer to accessibility would be walkability, but that's a large level, high in the chain of systemic intervention. But you can also get youth onto other forms of transportation. You mentioned being a bike kid in the 80s. I mean, I grew up in a cul-de-sac and biked around the cul-de-sac, but the closest grocery store on that east side that's so car dependent is a mile away. But they did the safe routes to school. And oh my gosh, the little carabiner clip on my keys is from that elementary school, Safe Routes to School. I still have it. It's a really strong clip. And it's getting that in the hands of kids and getting them on bikes and understanding that kids even have bikes and can learn to fix them themselves. And this kind of FUGA mentality of the whole thing is once you have it in the beginning, you have it for life, for the whole family. And so I think that's one way. And with regard to transit accessibility, you build that connectivity into it. Getting kids, I went on a field trip in high school. We took the city bus down to Arizona Theater Company. And that was my first time taking a city bus, because I had taken school buses prior to that because the city bus didn't go out. And you ask people when the first time they got on the bus is, and some people who have grown up in Tucson say never. And then you make them a little bit feel shamed about that, especially if they're fare free. I'm still telling Trader Joe's employees they're fare free and they should get on. So it's about spreading the word. I think Tucson could advertise it a little bit better, be proud that they're fare free, not kind of try to hide this public good that's free for everybody. And I guess tie it back to RTA, the Dedicated Transit Authority. I just got back from Chicago, CTA. Entire bands have been based on that authority's name. They can have this cultural impact on a city that can tie people to them that I don't think our youth have when they're not out on the city streets using the public goods.
Anybody can jump in.
I'll just jump on that because I think where you're going is like my love language, which is messaging and marketing. I think that there's some missing opportunities in and raising awareness around what we have here in Tucson. I think and also too, before we begin to messaging, I think it's also about how we work together. It can't be all or none. And I think that's something that we see in our communities a lot, especially with us organizers and community members and people who want to fight for things that, like, fair free transit. It can't be an all or none kind of thing. We have to find solutions that we can get past ourselves on and push them through. And then again, going back to the messaging side of things, if we build it, they will come, right? Like we like marketing is a magical thing, right? If we can get creative enough, we can really start to change how people think about transit and make it the preferred method. And then also we can just really make parking really expensive so that people use ride shares or other forms of transportation to get around the city, because it is accessible for the most part. And we don't have as many barriers as other cities do. I love getting to and from events safely, knowing that I'm not drinking and driving, I'm not taking up a parking spot, and it's all accessible. I think those are things that we need to find some fun and creative ways to celebrate and make sure people know that this city has those things right now. These are tangible things we have now. These are tangible solutions we have now so that people can get around.
I don't like to say it's up to us to just come up with where this money comes to fund this. But I know that the city alone brings so much tourism, so much industry, so many students coming to school here. There's so many benefits, and I don't see why within that fare free transit can't prosper, can't be uplifted through that, right? I don't know, I don't have the math, I don't have the formula, but if we can get data centers, here on a discount, I don't see why we can't have stuff towards us. So there is a creative way, there is a formula. We just have to push those people to make it and to really invest in us. So I don't have an answer other than keep pushing, right? We keep putting that pressure and saying, we already put enough money into our community. We have a public library that we like to visit free. We like to visit our buses free as well. Just keep that narrative.
I agree that communication is a big part of this, because I think that the legibility of the system and the knowledge in the community, I think there are ways that we could make sure that everybody understands that the system belongs to everybody. But I'm also a big believer in sort of start where you are. And what Jean said is valid. We live in a landscape where for a lot of people that have the ability to drive and the economic ability to drive, that may stay their preference. And sometimes people think too much, I think, in terms of, well, how do we get more people to use transit? How do we get people who don't want to use transit to use transit? I feel like the best way to improve a system is to focus on providing the best possible service that you can to the people who are using it and to the people who want to use it, because they're the ones who know what the needs are, and they're the ones who know how it works, and they're the ones that know why it works and who it works for. And so if you improve the customer experience for the people who are using the transit and communicate it well, then it will grow from there, and you won't be in a position of trying to sell something to people who aren't interested. You'll be selling it to people who are interested.
Let me add one comment that when I was in high school, you can keep at it, is what I'm saying. Don't give up. You can change the culture over time. When I was in high school, nobody I knew out of after junior high rode a bicycle. If you rode a bicycle to high school, when I was going to Catalina High School, you were looked down upon as like somebody who was really weird. It's like, haven't you grown up yet? You're out of junior high. Park your bike, ride with a friend in the car, walk, do anything. That was the attitude of the culture at the time, do anything but ride a bike. When I went to the University of Arizona, you'd see occasional bike now and then, but almost none. Look how the bike culture has changed. It can change. All the ideas everybody has, you just got to keep working on it.
Thank you so much. All right, we have a question. Yeah, absolutely. How do we get it funded? Yeah, thank you for the question. Okay, so Mayor and Council has committed to keeping it fare free. We know that we need to expand funding for our transit system to make it more accessible and more useful to more people, even though currently it does serve people's needs. And in light of RTA Next, this is actually really similar to a question that was submitted in advance, which is awesome, because it's been on my mind as well. The question is, RTA Next, do we pass it or do we come to the table and put together our own plan? And by us, by we, I mean Tucson. What are your thoughts about an alternative to RTA Next?
I'm going to vote no. The existing RTA has 27% of the money for transit of the total package, all right? The proposed, at this point, new RTA is down to something, I think the numbers we heard were 21%, weren't they? 21, 22%. That's not acceptable. After 20 years, we should at least have more. Okay, it was 27%. If they don't go to 33%, I'm not voting for it.
Yeah, I'm not gonna talk for long on this topic because it's not an area of expertise for me. I don't see it passing. And so it's very demoralizing for me to think about us trying to put our energy into, I mean, yeah. If they came up with something that was substantially better than what was there, it probably still wouldn't be good enough for what we're looking for. And so then we'd kind of be torn, right? So I guess somewhat reluctantly, just because there is certainly a lot of logic in doing things regionally. But the problem is that we've had this system for 20 years and we haven't been doing things regionally. So let's think about Tucson, and if Tucson does a good job, then that's going to be beneficial, I think, to the whole region.
I'm going to mention one other role I hold that I didn't earlier, because when it comes to regional transportation, you have to start talking about rail. And I'm a board member of All Aboard Arizona, just a group of people who are very passionate about rail and have been think about it in their free time the way I do. And regional projects have to have a higher capacity, and the maintenance cost is what you can start addressing there, because Houston has a 26-lane freeway that takes maintenance and still is congested. And so when you were talking earlier about the automobile being the most accessible relative to land use And our region is growing, and the region that we should be looking at is the Sun Corridor between Phoenix and Tucson for that. That is 85% of the state's population. So if you want to handle regional projects, it's got to be bigger. And so we can get city funding for transportation for our local maintenance and shift that focus like county-wise to push pressure them to work with 2 other counties to get that. Phoenix is the largest city in the nation without rail service. The tourism dollars alone of reconnecting LA to Phoenix, it trickles down at that point, unfortunately, but it does, because it's connectivity. It's that even when it's no connectivity versus some. And so, yes, you don't have to resume RTA next because you can switch to municipal rail authorities that we've been talking about, and then you can actually operate on a scale that the movement of people is happening relative to land use and resource costs that we have talked about with other projects happening in the city. The maintenance of them has to be the biggest factor, because we can only try to measure that for the next decade, let alone 5.
RTA has always been inequitable for Tucson. So just based on that, and we're the RTA next, like, no, it's something I can't support. So something, just thinking we can do something and work partnership wise without RTA. And yeah, exciting to think of a real regional, right?
Let's see, ditto to all the things said here, no. Also to that, I think I want to go back to like what was mentioned here before about the importance of transit. Is like it's a life-saving thing too, right? It's a cooling center, so let's just go with that. So like we find the money, right? We find the partnerships, we find a way to make it work because it's already happening. Why would you take away a resource that is already helping people, whether it's a cooling center or getting them to where they need to go? Why would you take it away if it's already here? And here's the power of messaging, right? Is they just don't like who's on the buses, right? There's a certain demographic of people that they are attacking. They're not attacking the fact that transit is free and that it's costing money. They're attacking the riders that are on the bus. And the things that those people need is not transit. It's a different kind of treatment. So let's not let them continue to like blur the lines of what's really happening. That's who's attacking us in Fare Free Transit. It's not the people that love it and use it every day and absolutely need it, like homeless veterans, right? Like let's look at the people who are really using it and how it is a life-saving, tangible thing that Tucson already has, and it's already working. They are mismessaging us and making it sound like it's an unsafe place and it's nothing but a certain demographic that's using it. That is trash.
All right, any questions from the audience? Yeah, Alex. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And I think the panelists heard Alex's question. I can't possibly replicate the whole thing, but very well said. And it, sort of touching on sort of issues of, oftentimes the folks who are advocating for public transit are not daily users. They may not necessarily see the things that are happening on transit that are causing safety concerns. The intersection of the homelessness crisis and how that impacts our public transit system and makes it feel not accessible to everybody, but at the same time, feeling, humanitarian values about the mobile cooling centers and the access that public transit gives. So any thoughts that people on the panel have as transit advocates who may be using our transit system at different levels, and thoughts about safety of the system, safety for all users.
I love this question. Again, going back to messaging, right? When you're talking about users and non-users, like that's what we're hearing. We're hearing people give their thoughts and opinions on things as a user and a non-user. And they are valid, right? But like they're talking about how it feels to be like at a bus stop or at the light rail, but I can also drive my car to a Walmart parking lot late at night, park it, walk from that parking spot up to the front and still kind of face some of the same types of uncomfortableness that I would at a bus stop, right? Like this uncomfortableness doesn't just happen at our bus stops. That's why they're doing such a great job with this messaging, making it sound like it's our bus stops are the most dangerous thing in the city. You can get the same kind of experience from a concert, right? Like this isn't just a bus stop, bus free transit issue. They are doing a good job of making us believe that. Now, I have been in some uncomfortable positions, and I have both been, I didn't have a car for like 3 years until I got a job that made me get one. I was so mad when I had to go register it. But as a bus rider, right, the majority of my rides when I got on there was like a lot of people that looked like they were either coming from work or going to work, and a lot of them were veterans, which I loved, and or animals. And yes, this wasn't the daytime. This was during working hours. But my experience was absolutely pleasant. And it wasn't every normal, able-bodied person that came and patroned that free bus. It was people that needed assistance to get on and off that bus. It was people that were clearly dealing with things, but it was a nice ride either way, and it was free. And wherever that person needed to go, they got there, right? So like, let's think about this as what is it like to just be in public, period, and not just at our bus stops.
I like what you said about you have to still address it because it's a real part of riding the bus, because I think that's where we do have to start getting a little bit bigger of like real, not just Band-Aid solutions, right? It's like, okay, exactly what Melissa said, most of the time it's just people trying to get between where they want to. But at nighttime, or as a non-cis white male, or as any other kind of vulnerable road user, maybe would be the term for it, there is that element of preparation to existing in public at all, right? That's kind of how it is, whether we wanted to admit it that way or not. And I think there are placemaking aspects of transportation that I think Lane Santa Cruz proved with Budget de la Gente. With what they wanted to fund was a shaded bus stop with a bench. Like that's what they wanted to spend their money on, like that element of shade from the sun. And ideally there'd be light as well, right, for nighttime, but give people money and they want to just put a bench where they already spend time. And I think that part of it has to be part of the bigger conversation of transit-oriented development. The housing has to be, the corridors tool, the community corridors tool, if you're not aware, in Tucson is this potential for doing some of this at the same time. We can build buildings up that with housing specifically along transit routes to help kind of make them go hand in hand, of addressing all these things at once. Of what we need is a little bit of density to encourage, if you saw a transit take, maybe bumping elbows with your neighbors, like maybe not stinky on the train like someone said in New York, but it's about just building that out better. And until then, it's doing these things like advocating for shade and benches when we can. And I think fare free is part of that. Unburdening Transit was the name of this event because it's more than just fare free. It's about what that cooling center on the street becomes as a connector between disconnected places when the infrastructure ends. The sidewalk ends in Tucson.
Yeah, using transit is an urban experience, even if you're doing it in a non-urban area in a way. Jarrett Walker has a lot of real simple things to say about sort of the social contract and how transit fits in. And I'd like to read a lot of it, but I'm not going to. But one little paragraph of this is, if you live in a suburban or rural area and get around by car, you may not be as comfortable with the company of diverse strangers because your daily life doesn't require that. If you can drive from home to the shopping center and then to the job in a business park, you might not spend much time in public spaces where everyone has a right to be. In that case, the intrinsic diversity of the bus and of the street might seem threatening to you. So I think, part of this is kind of the illusion of control. Everybody knows statistically it is vastly safer to be on a transit vehicle than it is to be driving around in a car. Not just for the traffic reasons, but also for the reasons that Melissa was pointing out too. You're by yourself in the parking lot and you don't have the rest of the people on the bus. You don't have the driver on the bus. You don't have the cameras on the bus and the video and the audio and all that stuff on the bus. But when you're driving around in your car, you are in control, so you perceive. And when you're on a bus and someone's maybe close to you, you don't feel in control, and you might be less tolerant of that person's behavior. For example, someone who's walking down the street on the other side of the street, behaving in a way that might be distasteful or even frightening to you, you can tolerate that because you're sitting on your porch watching them and they're 50 feet away from you. If that person is across the aisle on the bus, you might have less tolerance for whatever that is. But we have to think about the reality that we are sharing space with other humans in a city. And that's really all that it is. Personally, my experiences on the bus are very good. And when there are people on the bus who I think other people might be uncomfortable with, they're really not doing anything to me or to bother me. And so, again, it's a public space. And when there is pressure on society that makes things harder for people, those behaviors might be more prevalent, but they are going to be more prevalent everywhere. And the transit service is what people are relying on to get around. And we need to realize that anything we would do to our system to try to institute a payment system, let's not even think about if we were doing that specifically for the purpose of keeping certain people off. Any of those things that we did would not be improving the actual way that the system worked.
Thank you. Okay, I have another question that was submitted in advance, but are there other audience members with questions? A co-bus driver. Mm-hmm.
Veterans, but housing first initiatives or anything like that. I just like to know the panel opinion about having a co-bus driver.
Yeah. So like a potential solution in terms of making the buses feel safer. And this has also been called like an ambassador, but having a co-bus driver. What do you, any thoughts about providing something like that on our transit system?
Just a quick mention that Mayor Mamdani potentially, he's talking about fare free transit and a Department of Community Safety, the creation of something that would work separately from public safety, right? We always are hesitant about creating a new department for, policing of any kind, but the idea of what you're talking about being someone that's a community service worker, not necessarily someone there to police it. I love that idea. It's the idea of where public health meets public safety is a little bit of that EMT on the bus. Like that may be a little too much all the time, but I like the idea of a person that's a lot more accessible. And we do have, I was at a protest a couple weeks ago, and there were 12 cops on that drive, 12 cars as well. The idea that they're driving around with these vehicles, all this equipment we give them could be, if you fund the bus with some of that transportation money for vehicles that idle, maybe there's their money for it.
Yeah, thank you.
I just, anytime that you're able to build community and use community to be part of a solution, really just uplifts.
I would say after this panel too, keep the conversation going about solutions like this for sure, because that's part of why we're here.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, especially if it's like a volunteer program. A lot of these uniform services are always looking for ways to get their volunteer hours in, right? Whether they're military members or firefighters or EMTs, they're always looking for ways. So yeah, it's just like Vanessa said, if we find a way for them to invest their time and donate their their skilled services to us in a way that's voluntary, I think that's actually a really great idea and could be a great component to help really uplift what we're all trying to do here. I think that's a way to just keep the buses, just even more of a resource to the community. Again, just going back to making transit our preferred method, I just kind of want to circle back. Vanessa mentioned this very early on about how the thing that she dislikes the most is when she sees the investment, then it stops, right? If we work on making this a preferred method of transportation throughout the city, investment will come, right? And I think ideas like that from community members is why these kind of panels are so important. I love it.
This just real quickly, this just dovetails with one of the other major advantages of having the transit system be free, because it opens it up and encourages a far more diverse group of people at all different socioeconomic levels, et cetera, to ride, and that in itself promotes safety in the same way, perhaps even more broadly and more cheaply and more organically, that does improve the safety.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Taken the bus my entire life growing up. It was the first way I've ever known how to get around Tucson. At the time, when buses were just 25 cents, there were times where my mom couldn't afford to be able to pay even that. And we would have other people on that bus pay for us if the bus driver wouldn't allow us on to Tucson. Keeping them free would be so useful for everyone. And I think if there was a way for people to be able to donate, even though it wouldn't solve the issue with all buses, it would still help if people were able to get on buses, or to at least have that money go towards something else. If it does stay there free, donations from people to do and would use like transportation, or even if they don't, because they know how difficult it can be for other people. Using the bus, if it's okay, I'd like to share with some other experiences I found with times where transit was still having to be paid for. As a teen, getting out late from after school programs and not having a way home, I forgot my bus card. The bus driver would not let me on. And I was walking all the way home, and there was a person who had stopped their car and tried to get me to go home. Using the bus is so much safer for so many people to not have to put
Thank you so much for the question. So part of this question had to do with thoughts about people being able to donate to offset like the cost of if somebody can't access the system. They also recounted a story of how they didn't have the fare to get on a bus and were walking home by themselves, and how that's so much less safe than being able to ride on public transit. I think this will be our last question, but any last thoughts about some kind of system where people can pay if they want to pay into the system, to pay to make it more accessible, and any closing thoughts about innovative, like other ways to sort of get money for a better transit?
In Richmond, there's a program that I have talked about a lot, and I suddenly can't remember the name of it. But what it is a way of community partner. It's basically a nonprofit that community partners can contribute to, basically as a way of supporting keeping it free. I think that's a model we could look at. I think that I don't think that it's practical to have a system where people are physically donating money on the bus. But I do think that there could potentially be a system that used a QR code that allowed people to donate. And I also think that there could be some kind of a system that was sort of on a Patreon model where, you could subscribe as a Suntrans supporter and, the city could set something up like that. But again, I don't think that that's at the level of the kind of dedicated funding source that we need. But I think that if there's motivation to do that, then that would be something to spin up. I do want to just say real quickly that a lot of the subjects that have come up, things like the RTA, things like the way that our transit system operates, we want to do future, we want to keep these discussions going. And so we definitely want input from folks about what other subject areas we should treat and who other people we should have on these panels, because we're not covering everything tonight, obviously, but there's some kind of complicated issues that we need to gradually learn about. And that's why we're so happy that everybody's here. And I'm not trying to wrap it up unless Miranda is.
I just want to quickly say similar, is Friends of the Public Library not operated kind of like how you just described? So Friends of Suntran. Like there are pictures everywhere of things working in other ways. We just have to dream them here.
I just want to go back to what you were saying. Thank you so much for sharing that story. That's amazing. Because I think that's also something too, right? To think about like math-wise, we just want to simplify it a little bit. I did math earlier because I'm not good at it. But if the potential cost of shares was like $1.50, right? And say a poor family relied on that because they held multiple jobs and they say they use the transit, they took 200 rides a year, right? They would save $300 annually. That's not a whole lot. But if we want to put money on it, because that's how we like to look at what will be the economic turnout for us, if 1,000 multi-job holders who were poor needed this transit, that's $300,000 annually that would go back into the city, potentially, right? So those are some other just speaking points when people are like trying to disinvest the disinvested, right? I just thank you for sharing that story. That's important for us to bring that up about how it affects the poorer communities in Tucson. And then one other thing, I did want to share this. My mom, I'm a veteran. My dad's a veteran. My mom's a veteran. My mom was a homeless veteran for 3 years. And she was a homeless veteran in the state of Colorado and in the state of Seattle. She's good now because she was able to access the VA system and get the help that she needed. And when I asked her what was the hardest thing about that process, for her it was about transportation, getting to and from her appointments. So that's just one small victory, but in the city of Tucson, that could be many. And I love the fact that our city is doing this already, and I want to protect that because that means everything to me. I'm very proud of that.
So it sounds like a wrap up. No, but I think, thank you for leading in that, because our city is very small and special. We call ourselves the Pueblo, and it feels like that. So when we envision big and when we think about our city, what it can do, we really shouldn't limit ourselves. We are making these great strides in trying to make our city resilient. And here you are taking time out of your evening to be here and listen to us. So I just want to kind of tap into your energy here today. Don't let this be the end of this conversation. Please continue to come up to us, connect with us in ways. We're making moves in different ways with transportation, and we don't want to stop. So I just want to acknowledge the energy that y'all are bringing, the ideas. And our tomorrow looks brighter because of right now. So thank you.
In planning this event, we were talking about do we have to do it in person? And there was a huge sense of, well, yeah, you want to show up and just be in the space together, be a physical representation of the support for it. So to echo Vanessa, thank you for coming. Third places are what I talked about with Miranda and a transit take, and this is one of them, right? It was free, it was open to everybody. It's, there's seating and AC and shelter from the elements, and the sense of personalization here of the topic that we're talking about. I never thought I'd see this conversation happen here. That's why I left Tucson for college. I went to a city where I didn't have to own a car. As East Side Tucsonan, I thought I had to leave the city to get that experience. And spending time here is like really fighting to find this community of people of like, there are so many people in Tucson who believe that we can do this as Tucson grows. This is a way to do it in a healthy way, in a way that is cost effective, with trains potentially, ideally with people on them to Phoenix.
Just a quick comment that so many cities around the country right now that are still charging bus fares are looking at ways to make it free for many different groups of people, whether it's veterans, students, older people, younger people, disabled people, all different groups. Let's figure out how we can reduce their fares or exempt them from fares. And we also, all over the country, they're coming up with times and reasons to make transit free. Let's make it free this month because of air pollution. Let's make it free because Taylor Swift is coming to town. Let's make it free because there's going to be the Olympics. And what that tells you is that if you want people to use transit, you make it free. And so let's just be in the lead.
I just say keep plugging away. Your support is great. I'm glad to see how this many people come out just to talk about transit. Like I said, I've been an advocate for transit in this community since the 1970s, and there's always been some people that are interested in transit. But the real concluding thing I want to say is I want to thank the mayor and councils over all those years for their strong support for transit. We really have had real support for transit from the vast majority of the council people that have served over the last 40, 50 years. And that's why we have the transit system we have today. That's why it's one of the better, on a per capita basis, we have one of the best transit systems in the United States. You can go to lots of other cities our size and they don't have anywhere near the amount of service we do. And it's because the mayor and council has been committed to it for all these years. And so I urge you, vote for people that want to be solid for transit.
All right, thank you so much. Let's give our panelists a round of applause. Thank you so much for coming here. Please eat food, stick around and talk to people. Approach the panelists with any questions we didn't get to cover. Thanks to the coalition for letting us use this space, and have a good one. Thank you.
Let's go visit Jean.